9:20 at night. A blizzard has sealed every road out of the town. Inside a church basement shelter, a millionaire in a wet camel coat is laughing. He points at a 13-year-old boy stacking folding chairs.
$1 million if that kid can heal me.
The whole room laughs with him. It is the last thing that room will find funny tonight, because the millionaire's face is already sliding sideways. His right cheek sags. The coffee cup slips from his fingers and rolls under a table. The laughter thins into silence. Someone says his name twice. He answers with a slur. The nearest ambulance is 40 minutes out. The roads are ice. And the boy everyone just mocked sets down his paper cup, crosses the floor, and kneels. He presses 2 fingers to the man's wrist. The laugh dies the moment his fingers find the pulse. Nobody here knows what this boy already knows. Rewind 40 minutes. Back before the laughing. Back to when these 2 lives were still a mile apart. At 8:40 in a rented room above a shuttered laundromat, Miles Moore wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his grandmother's thin arm. He did it the way he did every night. Quiet, careful. The cuff hissed as it tightened. He watched the little dial climb, then fall, and read the number in the lamplight. 130, over 80, he said. Good, Grandma? That's good. Eleanor Moore smiled with the half of her face that still smiled. 18 months ago, a stroke had stolen the other half. It had taken her right hand, most of her balance, and a good deal of her speech. It had not taken her pride, and it had not taken the boy who kept her alive. Miles wrote the number in a worn spiral notebook. The cover was soft at the corners from 1,000 nights of handling. Under the number, he wrote the time, the way the clinic had taught him. Time was the thing that mattered. Time was the thing people forgot. She tried to say his name. It came out bent the way it always did, now the ends of it worn soft. He understood it anyway. He had learned her new voice the way you learn a song you love, note by note, until the gaps stopped mattering. I know, he said. I'm going. I'll be back before the 10 o'clock news. He warmed her tea and set the mug where the good hand could find it. He checked that her own little orange bottle of pills sat lined up on the windowsill, caps loose, the way she liked them, so the morning wouldn't be a fight. He tucked the blanket to her chin. He set her water within reach of her good hand. Then he pulled on a coat 2 sizes too big and stepped into the storm. The snow came sideways, the streetlights wore halos. Miles walked the icy block to the Fuller Street shelter with his notebook zipped inside his coat because on Friday nights the free clinic ran late and Nurse Ruth Taylor could always use a spare pair of hands. A mile away, a different kind of night was going wrong. Sterling Ashford's Blacktown car came off Mercer County Road at the worst possible curve. It did not crash. It simply lost the argument with the ice drifted and settled its front wheels into a ditch full of snow. In the back seat, Ashford swore once, then went silent, in the particular way rich men go silent when they expect the world to fix itself. His driver, Hank Wilson, worked the wheel and the pedals until the tires only dug deeper. Roads are closed, sir, Hank said. All of them. I've been trying for 20 minutes. Ashford looked out at the white nothing. 54 years old, and he had never once been stranded anywhere he did not choose to be. He was returning from a groundbreaking still in the camel coat he wore for cameras, still carrying the smile he wore for donors. There was exactly one light burning on that whole dark stretch of road. It spilled from a basement doorway under a hand-painted sign. Fuller Street Shelter, warm meals, free clinic, all welcome. Ashford almost laughed. 2 years ago, his firm had passed on funding this very place. A money pit, his people had called it. Now the money pit was the only warm room for Miles. We'll wait it out inside, he said. Briefly, Hank half carried him up the icy steps. Ashford shook the snow from a coat, worth more than the shelter's monthly rent, and stepped into the smell of coffee and wet wool and old radiators. And then he did a small thing that no one saw. He reached into his breast pocket, thumbed a white pill from an amber bottle, and dry swallowed it. Fast. Practiced. The bottle disappeared before it fully left his coat. He did not want to be a man who took pills, so he made sure he wasn't one in front of anyone. The room was full. Families at long tables, an old man asleep sitting up, a teenage boy in an oversized coat, moving between the chairs like he belonged to the place. Ruth Taylor looked up from the clinic corner and smiled at the boy. "Miles," she said. "Bless you. Grab the coffee urn before it boils dry." Miles nodded and went to work. He did not look at the millionaire in the fine coat. Not yet. Two strangers, one storm, and a clock on the wall that nobody in that room was watching. Nobody except the boy who watched clocks for a living. It did not take Sterling Ashford long to make himself the loudest thing in the room. He did not mean to be cruel. That was the worst part. He simply could not imagine that a place like this held anything he needed to respect. He waved off the folding chair Grace Anderson offered him, as if sitting might stain the coat. He glanced at the peeling paint, the mismatched mugs, the taped-up crack in the window, and he wore the small private smile of a man cataloging failure. Ruth Taylor brought him a paper cup of coffee. He looked at it the way you'd look at something found under a shoe. "That's kind," he said in a voice that made kindness sound like a diagnosis. "I'll pass. I try not to catch anything." A woman at the nearest table stiffened. Ruth only smiled the way people smile when they've heard worse and kept working anyway. "Suit yourself," she said. "The offer stands." Ashford turned to Hank, but he pitched his voice for the room. "You know what places like this actually need? Not volunteers, not soup, a balance sheet. Somebody who can count." He gestured at the little clinic corner, the donated cot, the first aid tin, the green case bolted to the wall. "That's the clinic. Is it? That box couldn't heal a paper cut." A few people laughed because it is hard not to laugh at power. Most did not. A small girl at the end table watched the man with the wide, unguarded eyes children save for things they don't understand yet. Her mother drew her a little closer. Ashford didn't notice. He was warming to his theme now. "Charity's a comfortable lie," he told Hank, loud enough to carry. "It lets everybody feel good and fixes nothing. You want to help these people, teach them to count. Teach them to build something that lasts." He said it the way men say things they have never once had to test. Across the room, Miles was helping the old man who'd woken up. He steadied a paper cup of soup into the man's shaking hands and folded his fingers around the warmth so it wouldn't spill. He did it without being asked. He did it the way he did everything, quietly, completely, without waiting for anyone to notice. Then he moved along the wall, and his eyes passed over the green case bolted there, and the first aid tin, and the donated cot. He took a small private inventory of the room the way some people can't help doing, where things were, what worked, what he'd reach for, if. He didn't know yet that he would need to. And that was the moment Ashford's eyes landed on Miles. The boy was restacking a leaning tower of chairs, 3 at a time, sliding them into a neat rank along the wall. He wore that coat like a tent. He was thin and young and entirely unbothered by the man in the camel coat. Ashford found this funny. "That your doctor," he said, loud, pointing his chin at the boy. "The staff, is he on call?" The room laughed again, uneasy this time. Miles set down the last chair. He straightened it so its front edge lined up with the others. Then he turned and he looked at the millionaire, and he said nothing at all. He did not scowl. He did not flinch. He simply took the man in the flushed face. The fine coat, the way one hand kept drifting up toward the left side of his chest and coming back down. Then Miles did two things that no one noticed because no one was watching the boy. They were all watching the rich man. He glanced at the green case bolted to the wall, the one with the white heart and the lightning bolt. He located it the way you locate an exit in a strange building without thinking, just in case. And he glanced at the clock above the door. 9:15. He filed the time away out of pure habit, the habit of a boy who had learned that in an emergency, the first casualty is always the truth about when it started. Ashford, delighted with himself, pressed on. "Tell you what," he announced, spreading his arms. "This whole town's broke. So here's a game. $1 million, 1 million to anyone in this room who can actually heal a man. Any takers?" He laughed. "No funny. Everybody wants my money. Nobody wants to earn it." He turned to say something else clever. He never got to it. Miles was already reading a room the millionaire thought he owned. It happened in the middle of a word. Ashford was mid-sentence something about earning something about worth when the word came apart in his mouth. The end of it slid off into a soft, wet slur like a tape dragging. He blinked. He put a hand out for the table and missed it. The paper cup dropped from his other hand and rolled, spilling a thin brown line across the floor. His right knee buckled. He caught himself against the folding table, and the table screeched a few inches across the tile. The room went quiet all at once. "Sir." Hank was up fast. "Mr. Ashford." Ashford tried to answer. What came out was not words. His mouth worked on the right side and hung slack on the left, and a thread of panic finally reached his eyes, because Sterling Ashford had never in his life failed to be understood. "He's having a heart attack," Hank said, and his voice cracked on it. He spun toward the clinic corner, grabbed the first aid tin, popped it open, dug for the little bottle. "Aspirin. You give aspirin. That's the thing. I writ it. You give aspirin." A hand closed over the tin. A small hand. A boy's hand. "Don't," Miles said. "Not yet." Hank stared at him. "Kid, get back. This is a grown man." "I know," Miles said. Calm, low, not a child's voice at all. "That's why we don't guess." He was already on his knees beside Ashford. He didn't shove Hank. He didn't shout. He just moved the way a person moves when their hands have done a thing 1,000 times and no longer need permission from the fear. His first move was the wrist. 2 fingers laid flat along the inside of Ashford's wrist, just below the thumb, not fumbling, placing them, finding the radial pulse on the first try. He held them there for a slow count. His lips moved a little, counting. He wasn't guessing at the number. He was feeling for the truth of it, the rhythm, the strength, whether it stumbled. He had felt 100 pulses in a dark room at 3 a.m. He knew the difference between a heart that was failing and a heart that was only frightened. This one was fast and even and strong. That told him something before the man moved a single muscle. "It's there," he said, mostly to himself. "Fast, but it's there. And he's breathing." He looked up, and now his voice was for the whole room. His heart's beating. He's breathing on his own. Nobody pushes on his chest. You hear me? Nobody starts compressions on a man whose heart is already working. You'll hurt him. Hank froze with the aspirin bottle in his fist. "Then what is it?" "I don't know yet," Miles said. "So we're going to find out before we do anything we can't take back." He set his hand over the tin again, gently this time, and closed it. "And we don't give him that. Not until we know which kind of emergency this is. Aspirin's right for one kind. It can kill somebody in another kind. You don't flip a coin with it." He turned back to Ashford. The man's eyes tracked him now, wide, humiliated, afraid. $1 million joke being handled by the punchline. "Sir," Miles said, close and clear, I need you to do a few things for me. Just try. Okay? He didn't wait for a nod. He knew he wouldn't get a clean one. Smile for me. Big as you can. Ashford tried. The left side of his face lifted. The right side stayed exactly where it was dead weight, sagging. Miles nodded once, like a man checking a box. Okay, now both arms. Hold them up in front of you, palms to the sky. Ashford lifted his left arm. His right came up halfway trembling, and then drifted down on its own slow, helpless, as if the air had turned to water only on that side. Okay, Miles said softer. One more. Say it after me. The sky is blue. Ashford's mouth moved. What came out was mush, a smear of sound where the word should have been, the consonants gone, the whole sentence collapsing in the middle. Miles sat back on his heels for 1 second, just one. And in that second, something in his face settled the way a doctor's face settles when the picture finishes assembling itself. Face, arm, speech. This isn't his heart, Miles said. This is a stroke. He said it plainly, no drama, the word landing in the room like a stone in still water. Then he did the thing that mattered more than any of it. He looked at Grace Anderson and he asked the only question that could still change the ending. When did he start acting funny the exact minute? Somebody has to know. Grace's mouth opened. Hank stammered, and the old truth almost got lost until Miles answered it himself because he was the one who'd been watching the clock. He was fine at 9:08. I heard him talking. It's 9:20 now. He looked around the ring of frightened faces. Somebody write that down. 9:08. That's the most important number in this room. Nobody moved. So the boy reached into his own coat, pulled out a worn spiral notebook, and wrote it himself. And the millionaire, who'd offered $1 million to be healed, lay on a shelter floor, watching a 13-year-old spend the only currency that could save him. Time. Hank found his voice, and it came out angry because angry is what fear wears when it can't do anything useful. Who are you? You're a kid. You don't get to... He's exactly who you want right now. That was Ruth Taylor. She'd crossed the room, and she knelt on Ashford's other side, and she was already following the boy's lead instead of taking over. A grown nurse deferring to a 13-year-old in front of everyone. Miles trained in our youth responder program, she said, finished top of the group, and that's not the half of it. She looked at Hank steadily. So, whatever he tells you to do, you do it. We don't have time for you to feel better about who's in charge. Miles wasn't listening to any of it. He was already reaching into the clinic kit. He came out with a small plastic device and a lancet, a glucometer. Low blood sugar can look exactly like a stroke, he said, half to himself, half to Ruth. Same droopy face, same slurred words, and if that's all this is, we fix it in 2 minutes with sugar, and we don't scare everybody half to death. He pricked the side of Ashford's fingertip, touched the strip to the bead of blood, and waited for the little screen to think. 110, he read. Normal. It's not his sugar. His jaw tightened. It's the real thing. Ruth watched him work, and to the frightened people around them, she said the thing that turned a strange boy into the safest person in the room. His grandmother had a stroke a year and a half ago, she said quietly. Miles has kept her alive at home ever since. He checks her pressure every night. He knows the signs of another one better than half the nurses I've worked with, because for him, it was never a class. It was Tuesday and Wednesday and every night after. The room looked at the boy in the oversized coat, and the room saw him for the first time. Not a punchline, not staff, not a poor kid stacking chairs for a warm place to be. A caregiver, a trained one, a boy who had been doing quiet, exact life or death work in a rented room every single night for a woman the world had also stopped seeing. Nobody had given him a certificate for those nights. Nobody had clapped. He had simply decided that the person in front of him would not slip away on his watch, and then he had made himself good enough to keep that promise. Ashford saw it too. He couldn't speak, but his good eye found the boy's face and stayed there, and something moved behind it that had nothing to do with money. Miles didn't notice the room changing. He was busy. He clicked his pen, opened the notebook to a clean page, and wrote a single line at the top. Onset 9:08. Fast, positive right side. Glucose 110. Then he looked up at the ring of faces and gave his first real order. I need this floor clear, and I need everyone to do exactly what I say. He's not out of danger. He's about 40 minutes from a hospital in good weather, and this is not good weather. He'd been doing this every night for 18 months. Tonight, the whole room would learn what that was worth. Miles Moore took command of a room full of adults without ever raising his voice. That was the strange thing. Grown men give orders by getting loud. The boy did the opposite. He got quieter and shorter and more exact, and somehow that made people lean in and obey. He can't lie flat on his back, Miles said. If he throws up, he could choke on it. So we're turning him onto his side, gently, on my count. Hank, you take the shoulders. Ruth, the hips. I've got his head. Hank obeyed. The anger had drained out of him and left only a man who badly wanted to be told what to do. 1, 2, 3. They rolled Sterling Ashford onto his left side slow and smooth, and Miles guided the man's head down onto a folded coat someone passed forward. He tipped the chin, a little opening the airway, and checked the breathing again with a hand hovering over the mouth. Good, he said. That's good. Coat under the head. Somebody hold that light steady over here. Grace angled a work lamp. The pool of yellow light framed the strange scene: a millionaire on a shelter floor, curled on his side like a sleeping child, and a boy crouched over him, utterly focused. Now listen, Miles said to all of them. This is the part everybody gets wrong. You're going to want to give him water. You're going to want to give him a pill or a snack or help him sit up. Don't. Nothing by mouth, not water, not food, not medicine. His swallow isn't working right now, and anything we put in his mouth can go straight into his lungs. The kindest thing you can do for this man is give him nothing and keep him still. The families at the tables nodded wide-eyed. The old man who'd been asleep sitting up was awake now, watching. Then Miles started the work that would matter most later, though no one there understood it yet. He opened his notebook, flat, on the tile, clicked his pen, and looked at the clock. 9:22, he said, writing. Pulse felt strong at the wrist, fast, breathing on his own even. Left side moving, right side weak. Right arm won't hold. Face drooped on the right. He glanced up. I'm going to write down what he's doing every 5 minutes. Because when help gets here, they're going to ask me to tell them the whole story fast, and I want to have it ready. I don't want to be remembering. I want to be reading. Ruth met his eyes across the body of the millionaire, and she nodded slowly, and there was something close to awe in it. She had run codes in real emergency rooms. She knew what she was looking at. She was looking at a 13-year-old keeping a timeline like a professional because he'd learned the hard way that a timeline is a life. She thought about all the reports she had taken over the years from grown, capable adults, the vague ones, the a little while ago, the I think around dinner, the fog that quietly costs people their brains. And here was a boy on a cold floor writing a stranger's life in 5-minute lines in a notebook, soft at the corners, because for him, the notebook had never been an assignment. It was the thing that stood between his grandmother and the worst morning of his life. He had built the habit out of love. Tonight, it would spend itself on a man who'd mocked him, and Miles wouldn't think twice about that, because to him, a person in trouble was only ever a person in trouble. Patience, Miles said. I need his medications. People who have strokes are almost always on something for it. It changes what the hospital can do. Can you check his coat? Ask his driver first. Check my, Hank started, then stopped, and just nodded. His inside pocket. He keeps things in there. He doesn't like anyone knowing. Ruth reached carefully into the fine camel coat. Her fingers closed on something small and she drew it out into the lamplight. An amber pill bottle. Miles took it and turned it so the label caught the light, and he read the name on it slowly out loud, the way you read something that changes everything. Warfarin, he said. Ruth's breath caught. A blood thinner. A blood thinner, Miles repeated. He set the bottle down on the open page of his notebook so it wouldn't get lost, and for a moment his hands went still, and the weight of the thing settled over him. Because now he understood exactly why his first instinct had been right. He turned to Hank and he held up the bottle so the man could see it. You wanted to give him aspirin. I want you to understand why I stopped you. There are two kinds of stroke. One's a clot, a pipe gets blocked. The other's a bleed, a pipe bursts. From the outside right now, on this floor, they can look the same. And this, he shook the amber bottle gently. This thins his blood so it doesn't clot, which is great for a clot. But if what he's got is a bleed, this medicine is making it worse every minute, and aspirin on top of it could have opened the door the rest of the way. Hank had gone pale. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Miles said, and there was no cruelty in it. That's the whole point. You can't guess with a person, you find out. Somewhere behind him the room had gone very still, and it was no longer the stillness of people watching a spectacle. It was the stillness of people watching someone do something true. Sterling Ashford lay on the floor with his cheek against a stranger's folded coat, and he could not move the right side of his body, and he could not shape a single word, and he was more helpless than he had ever been in 54 years of being obeyed. And the only person in the world who could help him was the boy he had pointed at and laughed at 11 minutes ago for the crime of stacking chairs. Ashford's good eye filled. A single tear tracked sideways across the bridge of his nose and fell to the coat, and he made a small broken sound that wasn't a word but meant one anyway. Miles saw it. He leaned in close so only Ashford could hear him, and he said the thing you say to your grandmother at 3 a.m. when she's frightened and can't tell you so. I've got you, Miles said. I know you're scared. I know you can't talk. You don't have to. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay right here and count for you until they come. Okay, you just keep breathing. Breathing's your only job. I'll do the rest. And the millionaire, who had offered $1 million as a joke, closed his eye and let a 13-year-old take care of him. Grace Anderson quietly moved the onlookers back, giving the boy room, keeping the space clear the way he'd asked. Ruth held the lamp and readied the blood pressure cuff and waited to be told what he needed instead of the other way around. The whole architecture of the room had flipped. An hour ago, the man in the fine coat had walked in, certain that he was the most important person here, that his money made him the center of gravity. Now the center of gravity was a kid on his knees on a cold floor, and the richest man for miles was following his instructions with his eyes because it was all he had left. Miles clicked his pen. He looked at the clock. 9:27, he said, and then caught himself, and it was such a small, human thing in the middle of all that fear. No, 9:28. Pulse, still strong, still breathing even, no change. He wrote it down. He looked at the door. Where's that ambulance? It was a question. It was about to become a problem, because outside, in the dark and the ice, the storm had just made everything worse. The first sign of trouble came from Ashford's own body. A sound started low in his throat, a wet rising heave. His stomach was turning. And a man who cannot swallow, throwing up while lying down, is a man who can drown on dry land. Miles moved before he'd finished thinking. He's going to be sick. Help me full onto his side all the way now. They rolled him further until he was firmly on his side, mouth angled down toward the floor. Whatever came up, came out, instead of going back down into his lungs. Miles swept a finger through the man's mouth, clearing it, keeping the airway open, and kept his own voice level even as his heart hammered. Good. That's good. Better out than in. You're okay. You're okay. He wiped his hand on his own oversized coat without a flicker of hesitation, because that is what caring for a person actually looks like up close, with no cameras. He kept 2 fingers back on the pulse. Still there? Still fast? Still fighting? Then Ruth's phone lit up in her hand, and the dispatcher's voice came through, and the news was bad. They're saying there's a tree down across Mercer County Road. Ruth relayed, her jaw tight. The ambulance can't get through that way. They have to turn around and come the long route. It's going to be another half hour, maybe more. The room seemed to shrink. 40 minutes had been frightening. Another 30 on top was a different kind of number. And that was the moment Hank Wilson broke. Fear had been building in him this whole time, and now it found the only shape it knew. He lunged for the first aid tin, again aspirin bottle rattling in his fist. Half an hour? He doesn't have half an hour lying there doing nothing. We have to do something. We give him the aspirin. That's what you do. That's what everyone knows. Stop. Miles didn't shout it. He put his body between Hank and the millionaire, and he held up the amber warfarin bottle like a badge, like the single piece of hard evidence it was. Look at this. Read it. He is already on a blood thinner. If this is a bleed in his brain, and we cannot rule that out not here, not without a scan, then thinning his blood, more could kill him. The aspirin isn't a rescue. It's a coin flip with his life, and the odds are ugly. I am not going to let you flip that coin because you're scared. I'm scared too. We do the safe thing. The safe thing is nothing in his mouth, on his side, keep him breathing, and wait for people who can see inside his head. Hank stood there, chest heaving, the bottle shaking in his hand. And then slowly he lowered it. He set it down on the cot. He sank onto a folding chair and put his face in his hands, and Grace put a hand on his shoulder, and the danger passed. Miles let out a slow breath and went back to the pulse, back to the count, back to the small, steady work that was the only thing holding the line. He didn't gloat. He didn't even look up. He just found the wrist again, and the rhythm was still there under his fingers, fast and stubborn, and he let it steady his own. Then the lights on the north wall died. Not all of them. Just that bank flickering once and going black as the storm dragged a line down somewhere out in the dark. Half the room dropped into shadow. A child at one of the tables started to cry. Miles didn't stop. He pulled out his phone, thumbed on the flashlight, and wedged it upright against the leg of the folding table so it threw a steady beam across Ashford's face. "It's okay," he called out to the whole room, to the crying child especially. "Lights go out in storms. It doesn't change anything we're doing. I can see everything I need to see." And he could. Because an hour ago, when Sterling Ashford was busy insulting this place, this boy had glanced at the clock over the door and filed away the time out of pure habit. He didn't need the wall clock anymore. He'd already made the storm's most important measurement his own. He looked at the phone screen. He wrote the next line by its glow. The road was blocked. The lights were dying. The clock was still running. And the boy just kept counting. They came at 10:05. Boots on the basement stairs, snow melting off heavy coats. 2 paramedics hauling a stretcher and a bag between them. Faces red with cold and stress from a night full of calls they couldn't reach fast enough. "What have we got?" the lead medic said already, scanning the room, already assuming. She saw the man on the floor, the flushed face, the fine coat, the driver wrecked in a chair. Adult male, down, clutching his chest earlier. Cardiac talk to me. And here was the moment the whole night had been building toward. Not a miracle, not a magic touch, just a boy with a notebook and everything he'd written in it. It's not cardiac, Miles said, and he stood and held out the open spiral notebook so she could see the page in her headlamp. It's a stroke. Let me give it to you fast because you're going to want to move. The medic's eyes flicked from the kid to the page and back that instinctive grown-up hesitation. Then she read the top line and the hesitation vanished because what she was looking at was cleaner than half the reports she got from adults. Onset 9:08, Miles said. Exact. I heard him talking then. 11 minutes later, his face dropped. So, we know when this started to the minute, and that's the number that decides everything for you, right? That's the number, the medic said, slowly reading. Go on. Fast, positive on the right. Face drooped, right arm drifted down and wouldn't hold. Speech came out as mush. I checked his sugar first to rule out a low. It was 110, normal. So it's not that. Pulse has been strong and fast at the wrist the whole time, and he's kept breathing on his own. I've got his vitals every 5 minutes since 9:22. No compressions, his heart never stopped. Nothing by mouth because his swallow's gone. We turned him on his side when he got sick, so he wouldn't aspirate. The medic was writing now fast on her own glove, keeping up. Kid, slow down. You did all this. There's one more thing, Miles said. The most important thing. He picked the amber bottle up off the notebook and put it in her hand. He's on warfarin, a blood thinner. His driver almost gave him aspirin and I stopped it. You can't treat this like a normal clot until somebody knows whether he's bleeding because the thinner changes all of it. The paramedic went very still for a second, the warfarin bottle in her palm, the notebook in her light. Then she looked at her partner, and something passed between them, the silent shorthand of people who do this for a living. Because the boy had just handed them the two things that emergency crews fight the hardest to get and most often lose: the exact time it started and the medication that changes the plan. These are the details that live and die in the first frantic minutes, the ones that vanish when everyone is shouting and no one is writing. They are worth more than any burst of heroics, and a boy had guarded them all night like they were made of glass. Without the onset time, they'd have to treat him as if the clock had already run out. No way to know if he was still inside the narrow window where the clot-busting drugs can save the brain, the window that closes somewhere past 4.5 hours and never opens again. With that time written down, witnessed exact, they could call ahead, and the stroke team could be ready the second he rolled through the doors. And without knowing about the warfarin, someone downstream might have reached for the wrong drug and turned a survivable stroke into a fatal bleed. The kid's notebook had done in 11 minutes what whole systems are built to do and still fumble on their worst nights. You didn't just keep him alive, the lead medic said. She wasn't rushing now, even in the middle of rushing. She looked the boy full in the face the way you look at someone you've decided to remember. You just saved him a lot more than his life. You saved his brain. You saved who he's going to be when he wakes up. Do you understand that? The way you kept this time, most grown adults don't. Most nurses have to be reminded. You led with it. Miles didn't know what to do with that. So he did what he always did. He looked down at the man on the floor. He's still scared, he said. He can hear you. Can you tell him he's going to be okay? They lifted Sterling Ashford onto the stretcher, strapped him, angled him safely on his side. As they raised him, his good eye searched the room in a small, frightened arc and found the boy. He couldn't speak. He would not be able to speak cleanly for a while, but he lifted his one good hand, the left one off the stretcher strap, just an inch, just enough, and he held it out toward Miles. Miles took it, held it for the 3 seconds it took to wheel past. You're going to be okay, Miles told him. They know everything now. I wrote it all down. I've got you." And the man who had offered $1 million as a joke gripped the hand of the boy he'd mocked and squeezed it with the only strength he had left, which was not much and was everything. Then the stretcher was up the stairs and gone into the storm, and the red light swept once across the snow through the high basement windows and vanished. The room let out a breath it had been holding for the better part of an hour. Ruth Taylor came and stood beside Miles, and she didn't say anything at first. She just put her hand on the back of his neck the way you steady someone who's been strong for too long and might now finally be allowed to be 13. "Go home," she said gently. "Your grandmother's waiting. You did more tonight than you know." Miles nodded. He bent down, picked his phone up off the floor, and clicked off the flashlight. He picked up his notebook, the amber bottle's ring still pressed faintly into the page. He closed the cover soft at the corners. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired and cold and worried about a slurred word and a drooping face, the way he was worried most nights about a different face in a different room. He pulled his oversized coat tight and went back out into the snow, one boy walking home through a storm. He had no idea that the man on the stretcher was already going to change his life. Sterling Ashford came back to Fuller Street 3 weeks later, on his own feet. He came in slow with a cane in his right hand and a slight drag in his right foot, and a careful way of forming his words, as if he was setting each one down gently to be sure it would hold. But he could walk, he could talk, he could say a boy's name and mean it. The doctors had told him the truth in plain words more than once so it would sink in. He had been minutes from a different ending. The clot in his brain had been caught inside the window barely, and only because someone had written down to the exact minute when it began. Because that time was known, the stroke team had been ready and the drugs had worked. Because the warfarin was known, no one had reached for the wrong thing in the dark. He had walked out of that hospital with a limp instead of being wheeled out of it forever, and the hinge the whole thing had turned on was a 13-year-old's spiral notebook. He'd had 3 weeks in a hospital bed to think about the sentence he'd said in that room. $1 million if that kid can heal me. He'd said it to be cruel and clever. He'd said it certain it was safe because of course no one could. Because of course the boy was nobody. The boy had been the only one who could. Grace Anderson brought him to the clinic corner, where Miles was, of course, restacking chairs. Some things don't change just because a man's whole life did. Ashford stopped a few feet away, both hands on the cane, and for a long moment he didn't try to speak. When he did, it came slow and careful, and completely without the old smile. "I said something in this room," he said. "You remember." "I remember," Miles said quietly. "I meant it as a joke, to make people laugh at you." Ashford's jaw worked. "And then you saved my life with your hands, and you saved the rest of me with a notebook. So..." He drew a breath. "I keep my word, even the words I'm ashamed of." He told the boy what he had decided over 3 weeks, lying still. The $1 million was real, and it was the smallest part. He was setting it into a fund for the Fuller Street shelter and its little free clinic, the money pit his people had once walked away from, so the cot and the green case on the wall would never again be all a boy had to work with. And there would be a scholarship, a real one standing renewed every year. Named the Eleanor Moore Scholarship after a grandmother most of the world had stopped seeing for young people who spend their childhoods keeping someone else alive. So the ones who learn medicine at a kitchen table at 3 in the morning, out of love and necessity, could learn it in a classroom too if they wanted, with the door held open instead of shut. And the last thing was not money at all. "You want to be a doctor?" Ashford said. It wasn't a question. "Ruth told me. I know a stroke neurologist, the one who read my scans actually, and told me a child had done her job for her before she got there. She wants to meet you. not for a photo, to teach you, for as long as you'll let her." He paused. "If you want it, it's yours either way, the fund, the scholarship. Those aren't a trade. You don't owe me anything for them. You already gave first." Miles was quiet for a while. He looked at the man, the cane, the careful mouth, the eyes that had finally learned to see the room they were standing in. "I don't need saving," Miles said at last. "Not sharp, just true. I've got my grandma, I've got Ruth, I've got this place. I'm okay." Then softer, "But a door held open that I'll take. For me and for whoever gets that scholarship after me. That's a good thing to build." He almost smiled. "Grandma's going to like that it's got her name on it. She always said I write everything down too much." Something broke open in Ashford's face, then quiet and real. "Turns out, he said, you don't write it down enough. The world could use more of it." Ruth, who had been listening from the clinic corner, wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist and pretended it was the cold. That same night, Grace Anderson wrote the scholarship's name on the shelter's chalkboard in careful capital letters, where everyone who came in from the storm would read it. The Eleanor Moore Scholarship. It stayed there for years. Miles went home that night the same way he went home every night. He climbed the stairs above the shuttered laundromat, and he let himself in, and Eleanor was waiting in her chair by the lamp. He wrapped the cuff around her thin arm. He watched the dial climb and fall. He read the number in the lamplight and said 128/80. "Good, Grandma. That's good." And he wrote it in the notebook, under the time, the way he did, every single night, scholarship or no scholarship, world watching or not. Because that was never about being seen. It was about her. It always had been. The money would open doors. The notebook was who he already was. And somewhere across town, a man was learning to walk again and learning for the first time how to look at people before he decided what they were worth. Here's the thing that stays after the storm clears and the ambulance lights are long gone. A man in a fine coat walked into a warm room and decided in a glance that he was the most important person there. He measured everyone by what they wore and what they earned, and he found a 13-year-old boy in an oversized coat, and he laughed. And then the ground fell out from under him, and it turned out the most important person in that room had been the one stacking chairs the whole time. Not because the world had blessed him, because he had trained his own hands night after night in a small room caring for someone he loved when no one was watching and no reward was coming. That's the part worth carrying home. A person's worth was never in the coat. It was never in the offer of $1 million. It was in the 2 fingers laid gently on a wrist, and the time written down to the exact minute, and the quiet voice that said, "I've got you. Keep breathing, I'll do the rest." The world is full of people we've decided not to look at. Some of them know exactly how to save us. If this story gave you a little more faith in people tonight, a quick subscribe is a simple way to walk with us as we keep telling them. And if you know someone who feels invisible, someone stacking the chairs while the room laughs, maybe share this so they hear that what they do in the dark is seen. There's always another overlooked kid out there learning something real, waiting for the night the room finally goes quiet enough to notice. We'll be here to tell you when it does. If this story gave you a little more faith in people tonight, a quick subscribe is a simple way to walk with us as we keep telling them. And if you know someone who feels invisible, someone stacking the chairs while the room laughs, maybe share this so they hear that what they do in the dark is seen.